of those molten droplets, meteoritic material that we found on the ocean floor at a depth of about 2 kilometers, 10% of them have a chemical composition that is not familiar from solar system materials.
Ever since the Manhattan Project, where a blackboard equation um, um, was turned into a weapon, and the military went, "Ooh, that's a good idea." Ever since Trinity, the military have wanted advanced physics weapons that the other side wouldn't know what hit them.
It's not surprising that Russia and maybe in some cases China too is using sophisticated drones to conduct espionage activities against military bases and other critical national infrastructure targets in the West. I mean, that's exactly what I would do if I was Russia or China.
But the whole thing of what happened at Rendlesham Forest was they needed to test it. And what John Burroughs and others saw, initially at least, was lasers and directed energy radar plasma effects.
President Trump has certainly dropped some hints that he knows some things, and he's come under some pressure to release things, just as, of course, there's huge public interest in releasing the remainder of the JFK files. I think with the drone situation, it's complicated and lots of different things are going on. Clearly, there's no getting away from the fact that, particularly in the US, because of the extensive mainstream media coverage, there was almost literally a sort of mass hysteria. And some people were misidentifying even aircraft and helicopter lights, bright stars and planets, and people were incorrectly saying, "Hey, I've seen one of these drones." Yeah. And then some of what was being seen were literally drones, and they were sometimes hobbyist drones, sometimes law enforcement drones, sometimes commercial drones used, for example, by real estate agents to take aerial photos of houses, that sort of thing. I mean, lots of people, surveyors, engineers, lots of people operate drones. I think people would be staggered if they knew just how many of these things were licensed, and actually, of course, how many unlicensed ones are probably flying around, perhaps sometimes for nefarious purposes, whether that's espionage, terrorism, whatever it is. And then you have the fact that in the UK and in Germany, certainly the US government assessment was that some of that was adversary drones. And again, the clue was obvious. In the UK, for example, a lot of these incursions around military bases started literally in the week that the British government authorized the use of long-range weapons like Storm Shadow against not just battlefield targets in Ukraine, but actually targets in Russia. And that, with Putin, crossed a red line. And he'd made it very clear that this was going to be a red line. And so there was probably a ramping up of espionage activity against military bases ahead of, if Putin decided or decides in the future to launch a limited attack of some sort against bases that he thinks are playing a role in the supply of weapons against Russia, then that's what will happen. And let's not kid ourselves. I mean, I've seen some of those Ministry of Defense videos about training Ukrainian personnel to fight against Russia. It's pretty clear we are in a proxy war with Russia right now. People don't like to say it, generally speaking, but we are. And you can debate the rights or wrongs of that, but it's pretty much a given in certain political, military and diplomatic circles. And I think if people look below the surface and look at a few things, they'll see that. And in those circumstances, it's not surprising that Russia and maybe in some cases China too, is using sophisticated drones to conduct espionage activities against military bases and other critical national infrastructure targets in the West. I mean, that's exactly what I would do if I was Russia or China. I mean, it's a standard part of military doctrine to map out targets which, if in the event of war or a limited strike, you would want to hit. But nobody wants to say it.
No, it is interesting. I mean, that was my first, even the ones in America, like you said, the timing of it. Putin said he was going to employ unconventional warfare methods, and this is unconventional. I mean, it's...
And again, I talk about this proxy war. I mean, the Ministry of Defense then put on their website, right on the front page, that the British Army had conducted a successful test of an EMP weapon capable of bringing down drones. So, I mean, it's like there's move and then there's counter move in this, whether you call it a proxy war or sometimes with aspects of this a war of nerves, but it is a little bit scary. And then you throw UAP into the mix, and of course the wider UAP question hasn't gone away. And so that's why I say, with all these drone sightings, United States, United Kingdom, Germany, Scandinavia, some of it is mass hysteria, some of it is ordinary drones, some of it is adversary drones, some of it may be something else. Now, in the past few days, of course, the White House press secretary made a comment about this and said that the New Jersey drones have now largely been identified as Federal Aviation Administration licensed drones conducting research. Well, a lot of people said, wait, what? You know, the FBI did an investigation into this very late in the days of the Biden administration. Surely the FBI, as part of that investigation, checked with the FAA. If this was the answer, why didn't they say so then? So people are still, this is very, very recent. It's a still unfolding story. Obviously, we've just had a few hours ago this tragic plane crash, which obviously is dominating the news cycle now, and FAA is probably not going to have drones as their top priority now, and the media are probably going to drop that question for a while. But in the medium to long term, we will obviously cycle back to this question, and it will be asked again, what was going on with these mystery drones? And I know this is a segue, but what about the wider UAP question, where President Trump has certainly dropped some hints that he knows some things, and he's come under some pressure to release things, just as, of course, there's huge public interest in releasing the remainder of the JFK files.
Yeah, I just wondered, I guess my last question is, because, you know, you got disclosure in the US with Trump, you've got whistleblowers coming forward like Jake Barber and the whole PSYOPs thing, maybe the psionics. What can we do in the UK to kickstart the disclosure movement over here? Because we have UAPs here. It's not just in America. How do we get it going?
I think it's down to citizen activists. There are some people with organizations. There are other people just doing it individually. But I think it needs more of an effort. MPs generally do respond when they think that an interest has built up a sort of critical mass of public interest and concern. So if enough constituents write to an MP about something, or if an MP becomes convinced that, for example, the government is not being fully truthful on something, they, as a matter of principle, will push back. So I think citizen activists need to keep lobbying their MPs and keep not just giving them an opportunity, because the MPs then will write to the Ministry of Defence. The Ministry of Defence will just trot out the same old tired standard line that I was, as part of my government job, trotting out to people decades ago. No, they need to lobby for specific actions to be taken. And I would suggest two things. Firstly, questions in Parliament. But secondly, this is the critical one, get the Parliamentary Defence Committee engaged on this. Because in the United States, it was only when a critical mass of congressional representatives, both in the Senate and the House, took a look at this that they realized they'd been conned. They were like, wait a minute. For years, the government and the media were telling us this is just all silly season stuff. It's all sci-fi conspiracy talk. And when they looked at it, they saw that it was a defense, national security, and air safety issue. And that's the angle that citizen activists should use with their MPs to engage the Defence Committee in Parliament. And then those people, I like to think, will be smart enough and honest enough to say, wait a minute, you know, something's going on here. Because, for example, Defence Intelligence at the MOD sent two people to the Pentagon for the inaugural UAP meeting. So if the Ministry of Defence wasn't interested and involved in this at some level, they wouldn't have been sending Defence Intelligence officials to Pentagon meetings. And yet, as far as I'm aware, nobody in Parliament, no one on the Defence Committee has held the Ministry of Defence to account for that and said, well, wait a minute, why are you telling us we're no longer interested in UFOs on the one hand, when on the other hand, you're attending classified briefings on the subject at the Department of Defense? Something doesn't add up, and that's what people need to keep pushing on.
If you could just give us an update on the important work that the Galileo project is doing, and whether you think we will find evidence of intelligent life in the universe this year.
Well, I'm certainly working on it because many times life is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If in particular, I just wrote an essay that says that the sign of intelligence is the attempt to retrieve a larger training data set. Just like large language models, the quality of our thoughts depend on the training set that we use. And the simplest example is that of a baby that lays in the crib and has a very limited view of the world. And then when the baby starts to crawl and walk, it gets a view of a bigger space within the home. But that is still very narrow-minded because the baby thinks, I'm at the center of the universe. I get all the attention of my parents. I am unique and special. And I should say that many of my colleagues who are astrobiologists behave just like this baby. They were born at this home that we call Earth. And they say that claiming that there is life like we find on Earth, and that includes microbial life or intelligent life, that would, if it exists, or to claim that it exists on an extraterrestrial object like an exoplanet, would be an extraordinary claim, they say, and that requires extraordinary evidence. And regarding intelligent life, most of them are not even seeking the evidence. They just dismiss it as something to be done maybe in the much later future. They are just focusing, a budget of more than $10 billion in the next several decades on searching for microbes. And, how is that any different from infants that are able to crawl and are looking through the windows and are seeing many homes like theirs on the street? We know that there are of the order of 100 billion Earth, Sun, systems that could have life as we know it, potentially. So it's just like looking through the windows and seeing a lot of houses like your own. And those infants are still believing that it would be an extraordinary claim to imagine that those homes have attention-deserving infants like them. Okay, so now, obviously, on the first day in the kindergarten, they would have a psychological shock when they see not only that there are many beings like them, but moreover, that some of them are more intelligent. Now, they may not need to wait until the first day in the kindergarten because there might be a visitor that brings some strangers into their home that look just like them. And so that is my goal to examine whether we are being visited, or perhaps there are packages arriving at our mailbox that indicate that there are other residents on our street. What could be simpler than that? I mean, that's just a matter of common sense. It's not an extraordinary claim that requires extraordinary evidence. It's an ordinary claim that requires ordinary evidence, because that's what is common sense, to imagine that under circumstances similar to what we find at our home, there would be results similar to what we find in our home, especially if you do the experiment 100 billion times in the Milky Way galaxy alone. So that sounds like common sense, but common sense is not common in academia. And what I'm trying to do is improve that perception. And the Galileo project is searching for objects that came into the solar system from outside the solar system that may be technological in origin. And because most of the artifacts that you may find from other civilizations may be in the form of space trash. You know, we create a lot of trash. In fact, just this week, I learned that the sky watchers monitoring the sky for meteors, asteroids, comets, they find near Earth objects that they call empty trash bag objects, ETBOs. I was not familiar with this nomenclature, but turns out these are objects that are not only affected by gravity, but also by solar radiation pressure. They are being carried away, just like, you know, a tumbling, empty trash bag made of thin layer of plastic that is, you know, blown in the wind and going down the street. So these objects are moving around the Earth, and we know that there are pieces of broken satellites and other debris, space trash. And I was not aware of this nomenclature, which by chance happens to apply to the first interstellar object that we discovered, Oumuamua, because it exhibited non-gravitational acceleration that was fully consistent with radiation pressure from the sun. And I suggested it in a paper, and that attracted a lot of attention, but also a lot of scrutiny from my colleagues, who are still arguing that it may be just a dark comet, basically a comet with an invisible cometary tail, which, you know, it's just like saying an elephant is an unstriped zebra, a zebra without stripes. It's a completely different, it could be some, I mean, an empty trash bag is a completely different entity, right, than a rocky object. So to call them dark comets is an oxymoron, but that's what the mainstream is doing. So anyway, the Galileo project is trying to look for technological objects that were not human-made in three ways. One is to find another object like Oumuamua, and this year there is a new observatory called the Rubin Observatory in Chile that will use a 3.2 gigapixel camera and monitor the southern sky every 4 days. And the data will be public. So with my Galileo postdocs, we are developing computer algorithms to identify interstellar objects and study them in greater detail, also using the Webb telescope. So that's the hope, that there would be more family members of Oumuamua that we will discover and learn more about whether it's space trash or rocks of some unusual properties being pushed by reflection of sunlight, or maybe even evaporating with an invisible tail, the way that comet experts are trying to argue. But one way or another, we'll try to get more data, because that's the only way to figure the truth. It's not by insisting on one explanation and pushing back on anyone that suggests an alternative, which is what is currently happening. So it's really, the beauty of science is that the truth will eventually be revealed. Just like with Galileo, in 1992, the Vatican admitted that Galileo was right. There was no choice. As much as the Vatican wanted us to be at the center of the universe, and it was 20 years after after humans reached the moon, a bit late. But what I'm saying is that with good enough data, it's inevitable to figure out the truth. So that's one path that we will be taking. But also, even more exciting is the construction of new observatories. So at the moment, I received funding, actually over the past month. I received the $3.45 million in donations for constructing additional observatories. So we have one that is operating at Harvard University. That was the first one that we used to test our instruments, to calibrate them, and to check our machine learning models. And the idea is we are monitoring objects in the sky. Every observatory sees about 100,000 objects per month. So altogether, more than 1 million in a year. And we use machine learning to figure out whether all of them are familiar, whether they are birds, drones, balloons, airplanes, satellites. And that is done by imaging them, but also, so we are looking at the infrared, optical, radio, and audio signatures of those objects. But the goal is to have multiple units looking at the same objects so that we can figure out the distance from triangulation, from seeing the same object from different directions. And so we have one observatory that already gave us data on more than 1 million objects. We wrote a paper about half a million of them already, published it. It's accepted for publication. And we are getting close to the construction of a second observatory in Pennsylvania, and there will be a third one in Nevada by summer 2025, and then another one, hopefully in Indiana, in the longer, a more distant future. So altogether 4 of them, which would mean that, it could be around 2 million objects, over a period of 2 years for each observatory, altogether adding up to 8 million or close to 10 million objects that we will have within a few years. And that means that even if 1 in a million of these objects is anomalous in any way, by flight characteristics, by the image, we will find it, and then obviously we will share the data with the public, because the military reports about objects they don't understand. And then I should say the third path that we're taking is looking after the materials of interstellar meteors. These are objects that collide with Earth, and because of their high speed, we can infer that they came from outside the solar system. They're not bound by gravity to the sun. Together with my student, Amir Siraj, we discovered one of them from 2014 that was identified by sensors on US government satellites. And I led an expedition to the Pacific Ocean to collect materials from that meteor. And we analyzed the materials and found that 10% of those molten droplets, meteoritic material that we found on the ocean floor at a depth of about 2 kilometers, 10% of them have a chemical composition that is not familiar from solar system materials. And this was based on tiny molten droplets, less than 1 millimeter in size. We now wish to have a second expedition. It will be more expensive, $6.5 million, that will employ a robot, a remotely operated vehicle that will put on the ocean floor and collect bigger pieces from the crash site of this interstellar meteor in the Pacific Ocean. And I'm still waiting to hear if we get the funding for this expedition. We have already a ship waiting for us potentially in August 2025. So I very much hope we will get, we need $1 million to put as down payment on the ship, and we are waiting for this funding. But altogether, I'm very excited. I think 2025 will get us closer to interesting evidence for interstellar objects.
That's brilliant. I mean, really good luck with the research. I hope you get the funding sorted for the expedition, because it is important work. And you've already found evidence that 10% of the materials from these very small droplets are not from this solar system. Is basically what you're saying, isn't it? So that's fantastic. So,
Right.
I'm sure you're the person, and your team will find the evidence, and it will, will change our place in the universe, which may be a good thing.
I very much hope so.
The chat, basically, I'm making this film. It's on the drone situation in the US and UK.
Good.
And I just wanted your thoughts on it, really. What you think causing this? Nick Pope, pretty sure it's the Russians meddling, and
well, yeah, Nick and I did an interview, and I think what happened at Lakenheath, and not only at Lakenheath, but even the married quarters of NATO and RAF MOD personnel in Britain, immediately following Britain's decision to allow an intermediate kind of cruise missile to be sold and deployed in Ukraine. In Nick Pope and my old age decision, we remember when back in the Cold War that there was a group of bad actors, and these were people who sympathized with the Soviet Union Marxism and tended to support that regime, and were prepared to carry out actions in Britain. The specific case was people who lived near Holyloch, who would report American nuclear submarine movements to maybe CND. And they just thought they were part of CND, but in fact, CND and Marxism Today and those kind of things were compromised and were in fact being partially funded by KGB and the Soviet Union. So they didn't realize that they were, the Soviets called them useful idiots, which I think is horrible and an amazing title. And Nick and I grew up, were around in that kind of age in the 1980s, where useful idiots was a kind of term he knew about inside the MOD. And my background working on things like BBC Panorama, where we talked a lot about useful idiots. I remember that. So when Lakenheath happened, it seemed very unlikely to be UFOs. It seemed unlikely to be hobby drones. And it certainly wasn't an operation where the modern-day Russia, who was obviously peed off with Britain, sent drones over from the Soviet Union, or the Russia today. Sorry, my age. But they could have somehow persuaded British citizens, British nationals, residents of some who had some sympathy towards the Russian position, to go and mount an operation, either by paying them or that used to happen as well, or by more horrible kind of persuasion, threatening them. And I definitely think it was a sign from Russia in Lakenheath. Well, we'll go on and talk about New Jersey, but in the Lakenheath and the British case, I really think it was Russia. I really think they were demonstrating their ability at unconventional warfare. Wake up, Britain! You can't you can't shoot down a drone with an F-15. You can't. I mean, there's, one goes at 10 feet above the ground at 20 miles an hour, and one goes at whatever miles an hour. I mean, it's inappropriate. Nick Pope said the British MOD are living in the past. We're fighting yesterday's war. And the war today involves unconventional methods. And one of the biggest that's been deployed, obviously, in Ukraine by the Ukrainians and Russians are drones. And I think it was a sign to Britain, like, wake up, stop sending missiles to Ukraine, and we know where your air crew's married quarters are. I mean, it wasn't just Lakenheath; it was all over the place in Britain. That these, and they purposely wanted to be seen. They weren't spying, they weren't eavesdropping, they weren't clandestine. These were drones. Probably hobby-sized drones, maybe slightly bigger, but those exist today. We're not all just DJI drones from Argos. I mean, these bigger drones exist, but they had lights on them, and I think they were sending a message to Britain. Now, the drone scare in the United States, I think, is pretty different, and it's very, very interesting, and I think it's been handled really badly by everybody. I can't believe. I mean, I'm a private pilot, and New Jersey's crowded with air traffic control, radar, drones. You can track them, and the FAA did bugger all. I mean, Homeland Security. I mean, it obviously was something of national security, because people were worried about it. I think the response for New Jersey politicians was hysterical. I mean, I think that their mayors and their police chiefs and things, I don't think they reacted really well. They didn't reassure the public. If anything, they scared people more. I think I would actually like to say that the drone scare in New Jersey was successful. Whatever it was psychological warfare. I think people were truly rather unsettled. That's rather British. It scared the pants off the New Jersey people because they didn't know what it was, and nobody was telling them. Now, what it really was is probably mass hysteria. I mean, I think there are some... there's a lot more drones than we realize in our airspace. I looked into this, and the FAA have just authorized quadcopter testing at night, which, most people just don't know things like that. Not that the FAA came out and told it publicly, because that would have been really useful. There are companies in the United States who are looking for air taxi services using large drones. I mean, these weren't hobby drones. Some of them were strange. Some of them were, big, but they all had flashing lights and navigation lights and were the kind of speeds and physics. There were some reports of weird stuff, but as you know, Mark, I mean, 80% of sightings are just, you can actually work out what they are. I don't know if any of the New Jersey drones were really anomalous. The ones I saw, the videos I saw, I went, I know what that is. It's a drone, it's an airplane. That's my opinion. Do you think any of them were truly anomalous?
I'm not sure.
No, that's true. We're not sure.
But what I'm interested in, do you think, though, that, say, the US and the UK military has really advanced man-made technology that could look like a UAP, give the appearance of being very, very unconventional?
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, if I have to have a T-shirt for my YouTube channel, it'd be a long T-shirt because I'm going to make it into a sentence. It's ever since the Manhattan Project, where a blackboard equation was turned into a weapon, and the military went, "Ooh, that's a good idea." Ever since Trinity, the military have wanted advanced physics weapons that the other side wouldn't know what hit them. And so the amount of money, research, into specifically physics. I mean, but also psychology and chemical warfare and things. But if you talk about physics, the amazing developments in stealth. Britain had stealth in the 1950s. We think that stealth fighters were 1980s and 90s. No, they weren't. Britain was the leading place for stealth materials. Marconi built the first kind of radar. They understood how to refract, and I'm not saying reflect, I'm not saying absorb, I'm saying this very specifically refract microwave energy on the surface skin of an airframe. And then it turned into metamaterials, which was even more sophisticated skins. And as it developed, it became more robust, because originally it was very fragile. And, that kind of thing means that this secret physics, really good engineering, really good physics has gone on. And, in the UFO community, we continually say the 5 observables. Well, the 5 observables come from a military contractor. They are the things that they can observe. They don't have one, maybe, but they can observe how they operate. So, could we build one that does that? Well, that's why they're correlating that, because there's a great interest in building stuff which is unconventional, because it's good military policy. Have they made them? I think so.
Yeah, I think so too. So where in the UK do you think the UK has a kind of Area 51 type of place?
I think it has a number of Area 51s. I mean, I think while you went camping in Suffolk, you were near certainly what was Area 50 and a half, now closed down and now a national trust, called Orford Ness. I mean, Orford Ness, from the birth of Robert Watson Watt testing Tesla's death ray in 1938, stolen from Tesla, right up until it closed, right up to the most brilliant story about Cobra Mist and its connection to Bawdsey and Sizewell Nuclear Power Station, Bentwaters and Martlesham Heath and Adastral Park are, I mean, it was Britain's secret military test zone for physics specifically, unlike, Porton Down with chemicals and biological warfare, Orford Ness. But there's other places. I mean, part of the wonderful, the UFO that keeps giving, called Calvine, the Calvine story, there is a Marconi, which are now part of BAE Systems in Wharton and other laboratories in Britain, other sites, have a Area 51 military closed test area in the North Sea. So they can test airframes and radar stuff and stealth and things just off the coast of Aberdeen, I believe. I don't know how I know that, but somebody at Wharton might have told me. I mean, I mean, I grew up in Scotland. I lived in Machrihanish, literally. And my father, I didn't realize, bless his socks, long departed, lied to us. I mean, he told me he was involved in the whiskey industry, but he had spent his entire life in the civil service since coming out of World War II as a tank commander. And by the time we moved to Campbelltown in 1972, he was at the level in the civil service of having a Whitehall position, and he'd gone from small office to regional to head, being in charge of most of the west of Scotland. And then he said to us, we're not moving to, he's not very Scottish actually, my mum is, but my dad said something like, we're not moving to London, we're moving to Machrihanish. And I went, where's that? And he said, it's a wee seaside town with an airport. I went, okay, that sounds good. And I went, I was like 14 and I went to school there. It was But I never questioned why he was there. And he said, they're expanding the whiskey industry. I went, well, that's a bit small fry for you, mate, isn't it? And it turned out that he was in charge of Machrihanish. Machrihanish was NATO's of Europe's import and export center. Anything, weapons, Hershey bars, came into Macrohanishon from the United States, always exported, lots of stuff, but had to go through British government, and I had no idea it's my dad who was in charge of it. So Nick knows that. Nick Pope knows that. It's like great.
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't know it.
You mentioned the Calvin, the infamous photograph. I mean, that looks to me like something that is man-made. That is our technology.
It is.
I don't think it's extraterrestrial.
No. It'd be rubbish. Well, I mean, yeah. I think a lot of people in the UFO community hate me. No, they don't. They're interested in me, but I don't. As you can see, I have an otter on my wall. What I don't have is a poster that says "I believe," because I don't believe. I like to ask questions, and I, also bless my socks for my rubbish end of 2024, announcing that we're not alone in the universe. I'm the person who's saying that ET exists. I know they exist. People have told me. We've got proof that we're not alone in the universe, but we're not being told that. So people don't say that I don't believe in UFOs. Well, I don't believe in them. I want evidence. I want proof. ET exist, and ET are highly strange, and they're nothing like we think. They might not even be in this physical or time realm that we exist in. So anything that flies at flight levels, anything that is obviously made of normal-ish materials, and in the Jacques Vallée saying, if it's not highly strange, it's probably not. I don't think the Calvin craft was built on the planet Zog. I think it was probably built in the United States. It's probably a reconnaissance drone for the invasion of Kuwait.
That's the timing of it, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah. Look, just like we should talk when we talk about Rendlesham. I mean, the thing that I do from my background is ask simple questions. Just everybody should do this: who, what, where, when, and why, and how. I mean, just answer those. I mean, and if you don't say it's a flying saucer, ask where was it? Oh, it was in the Scottish military test zone. Why would the flying saucer be in? Like Jake Barber's egg. It was on a range. Well, that was very nice of the aliens to land their effing egg on a military range, a secret range. Why isn't it in a farmer's field in Wisconsin?
He was claiming that it was manufactured psychically or manifested psychically, but why didn't it?
I think that's a different issue. But well, all right. Oh, yeah. You can, of course, you can say anything. I mean, I suppose it could have been summoned. I mean, but it's so difficult.
Yeah, just going back, we'll get into Rendlesham and the film that we did.
Oh, good.
Because I've been wanting to test out the CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, the manifesting of orbs, lights.
Oh yeah, sure.
I am still a little bit skeptical about it, but I've done it a couple of times now, and strange stuff has happened.
Good.
Whether that's coincidence or, I mean, like we tried it in Rendlesham, and I sent you the film. You heard.
You certainly had an encounter with something. I have a theory of what it is, but I'll tell you about that in a minute.
Sure. So I'm going to test it out again. I don't understand how it works. Like you, I do. There's going to be life out there. I haven't. I haven't seen proof of it, but there's going to be life out there, and it's probably going to be far more evolved than we are. Speaking to Harvey Loeb, he
right.
He's convinced there's life out there, and it's going to be far more intelligent, and its understanding of physics is going to be way beyond ours.
It'll be very different. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rendlesham, it's always interested me, but I mean, I guess the things you have to take into account with Rendlesham, it was 1980, it was height of the Cold War, it was a NATO base that most likely had nuclear warheads.
Yeah,
Officially.
yeah,
So
probably in both bases.
yeah, so that's the key thing here, really.
Meh,
But yeah,
It's not the key thing. The key thing is where. Well, answer the question. Where is it? And it's not a forest of scrubby woodland, although that's interesting in itself. The actual forest is a key, but the real question where is what's around it.
okay, you tell me what's
Suffolk.
around it. Yes, Suffolk. Yeah. So give us your take on what you think the Rendlesham.
Oh, yeah. All right. Okay. In a nutshell, when was it? Oh, it was in December 1980. All right. So December 1980, what was going on? Well, we were in the middle of the Cold War, but we were also in a secret war that most people don't realize. Later on, in the mid-80s, Reagan came to power and announced that they were thinking of doing Star Wars, SDI. But in fact, if you think about it, Reagan was a hawk. Reagan was the man calling the Soviets the evil empire. Why would he want a defense shield? Because it wasn't Ronald Reagan's. He inherited Jimmy Carter's dovish defense shield. Jimmy Carter is a physicist. Jimmy Carter knows all about nuclear. He's a friend of Edward Teller and people like that. And Teller and people went to Carter and said, I think we have the technology in the United States, initially, very much his technology, to make a defense shield rather than fighting a war. Why don't we secretly defend ourselves against it? So by 1980, in the United Kingdom, Thatcher was in power, and Thatcher was looking for any deal. She's also a scientist, and she was looking for any deal for money for Britain. And Britain, since 1930s, has worked on directed energy weapons and physics, very much plasma and radar. I mean, those are the two things Britain excels in, DEW weapons. And, it was all going on at Suffolk. and as a main headquarters, I mean, some of the big places in Suffolk were Bawdsey with their directed energy weapon that they kind of pretended was also useful as a radar, but it was also the Scorpion CW radar was a directed energy weapon. Cobra Mist was a non-nuclear EMP pulse weapon. I've spoken to people who work there. Nobody in a million years calls it an over-the-horizon radar. That was just made-up bollocks. It was. They might have experimented with it, but it wasn't. The antenna was pointing in the right direction. It was pointing towards Finland. The map of its coverage was Belgium, Western Germany, Denmark, Finland. Hang on a minute. Those people have radar. Why do you need to have an over-the-horizon radar in Suffolk to look at Germany? You don't. It wasn't. And, of course, we have filing tails, which is genuinely can be used for ionospheric bouncing just up the road, a few hundred miles up, in East Yorkshire. Yeah. But I mean, it's looking in the same direction, and that's genuinely a space radar. Cobra Mist was not. So all this stuff was going on, and Thatcher and Heseltine said, oh, we could sell it to you guys. There's a few things you should come over and look at. The liaison between the MOD and the DOD and SDI was immense. So Britain tried to sell, probably did, sell non-nuclear EMP and directed energy weapons to the SDI program. And the headquarters of that was in Martlesham Heath at Astral Park, which was pretending to be partially a British Telecom lab, amongst other things. Defence contractors were there. It's a big park. There is a BT lab there, but there's lots of other things. And the headquarters for the US was Bentwaters. The test station was Orford Ness. The operational directed energy weapons were already installed at Bawdsey and being tested out in the North Sea. If you were an inshore fisherman based at Great Yarmouth, you were told, you could read the notum that says, don't look towards Orford Ness, some bright lights might be seen. I mean, they definitely were testing a DEW, and Cobra Mist is a great story. Cobra Mist was closed down because they knew how it worked. They'd finished their mission. It closed down because they knew how it worked, and they did a deal with the Soviets. I mean, but you didn't hear me say that. But the whole thing of what happened at Rendlesham Forest was they needed to test it, and what John Burroughs and others saw, initially at least, was lasers and directed energy radar plasma effects. Then was what eventually injured certain service personnel actually emblematic of those technologies? Yes, Gary Nolan and the CIA chief medical officer know about John Burroughs' injuries, and he was injured by non-ionizing frequencies based on high-frequency electromagnetic spectrum output and plasma, which are both the things that they were testing at the time. But there is a continuing mystery of Rendlesham Forest, and I'll just go and say what it is right now, and that is Colonel Holt, because Colonel Holt is a complete mystery to me. Because if they knew that this project, these tests were going on, the deputy base commander would have at least known something about it, even if he didn't know what they were doing. He would have been told at least, like, just keep everybody on base, would you?
Yeah.
And why Burroughs and Penistone and Cabanza went off base looking for a downed aircraft, and then why Holt went out on night 3 with his micro cassette recorder and is genuinely surprised by what he's seeing, I find very perplexing, because it means that what they are seeing isn't known to the deputy base commander. So there is possible, and John Burroughs certainly thinks this, that there was a test. It had been going on for weeks, supposedly. The 3 nights were just a culmination of it. And on those 3 fateful nights, something else happened. Something happened that was more than just the lasers being fired from Orford.
So could these tests attracted something or somebody to that area?
It's difficult to know. I'm trying. In my filmmaking, Mark, and you know what this is like. I'm trying to think. The best word I've come up with is the word evoke, because did it attract? Did it produce? Did it, manifest? Did it make something time jump or appear? I don't know. It did something. I think the effects that they saw were more than man-made. I think there's more to it than just attack. I do think they were up to something. I mean, seeing the data, forget the conclusions, forget the ideas. I've seen the data, the evidence of what they were doing. I mean, people have shared it with me. I'm actually quite worried about I just had a long chat with Nick about sharing it, because it's still, if you even today type in non-nuclear EMP, it's still like, I don't know if you really should talk about that. And so there's a lot of stuff, and Martlesham want to be really secret. I've been very blacklisted by people, ex-Bawdsey Manor people, who don't want to talk about what they were really doing. And the funniest story, and I'm about to do a film in the next week or so, is the connection between with something quite innocent, which is called Sizewell A nuclear power station, because all this technology needed a power source, and why Britain's largest, because it was at the time, nuclear power station was built on a shingle wobbly bank about 138 miles from the nearest town of size, with an enormously expensive interconnect to the national grid, with no industry. The only people who could use it, Orford Ness would like it. Cobra Mist definitely need it, and I think there's a connection to, and the press officer at Sizewell hates me, so that's great. I mean, Rendlesham Forest, though, is like unbelievably dug up. Because from World War II, they had the FIDO system at Woodbridge, which was large burning gasoline petrol down the other side of the runway to lift the fog.
Yeah.
And the the tanks to store the petrol was in Bentwaters. So there's lots of large, maybe 10-inch diameter pipes going between the two bases. And John Burroughs says that when he was there, he heard that the pipes were reused for other stuff.
I heard them say that as well. I think you but or Nick Pope told me, but it was I mean it is interesting. I just want to go back to this idea before we go of the UK's secret kind of military bases, because there's one I'm going to go investigate in Hertfordshire. It's called Woodcock Hill.
I can't wait. Good.
It's owned by the Home Office. Officially, it's shut down, but it's not.
Radio station?
Well, yeah, it used to be part of Bletchley Park. It was one of the beacons. It was used in Bletchley Park. Bletchley Park connected to it. That's where its origins come from.
Oh, great.
Now it's allegedly closed down, but I know I've spoken to the residents. In the last couple of years, they've had letters saying drones are going to be tested. Do not be worried if you see anything unusual. Okay.
Oh, right, drone.
And then there's also the locals claim there's an underground kind of bunker base there, and the field there's nothing on it. It's just you can't build on it, and it's got a lot of high-level security, a bit like Porton Down, and I think it is linked to Porton Down in terms of the hierarchy of the government. So it could be linked to that, and also
there's a government defense authority that deals with all of it. They have an acronym, but I'm sure it's
so we're gonna go up and investigate and see if we can see anything.
Fly your drone. No, don't.
We do have a drone actually, but for filming. But I
know. So do I. Whoa! Are we arrested?
Yeah.
I wonder if they're testing anti-drone defense. It's a radio. It has a laboratory. It has. It's a good place, a bit out of the way.
Yeah.
And with that memo saying you might see drones, they might be doing not flying drones, but disabling drones. I don't know.
Possibly. And the other thing as well is
we need to do that.
I actually know someone who worked there, and
good.
She couldn't tell me obviously what she did, but I know she's an astrophysicist. Okay, very very clever.
Oh right, okay.
And the only thing she told me, she spends half the time there and then half the time at MI6. So it's that level. So which is interesting.
Oh, it sounds very intriguing.
Yeah,
because that connection is interesting, isn't it?
It is.
Sure. Oh, I can't even imagine. Oh no, get to the bottom of it. Great, fantastic.
So we'll go and have a look. And also, I've been
I remember talking to you, and I'll send you a pie to Brixton Jail. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, we'll be a bit careful. But
right.
The other thing is, I've got a lot of people still messaging me from Mildenhall, which I know is not far from Lakenheath.
Absolutely.
But they're still seeing drones on a nightly basis, and they're being followed or escorted by jets.
Are they? Oh, right.
And,
I would have. That's surprising. I would have thought that it was a short, sharp shock by bad actors, and they'd stop because there's no point in doing. There's no point in doing it anymore because it's happened.
Maybe they're just being
copycat.
I don't know. But also,
weird.
This lady, I'll show you. She's been in. I don't know if you can see it. I'll send you a photo.
Yes.
Been contacted by special forces
because they want to know what she knows.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So I'm going to phone this guy when we're filming. I'm going to phone him up.
Right.
See what he says. Maybe. So yeah, maybe.
I mean, all right. So, Mark, the thing that you and I both do, which is, I mean, my background is in TV and in media, is that we are doing what used to be done by the press, and it takes a YouTube investigator, it takes a social media scientist, as I call you, to actually do this. And we're not earning great amount of money for it. We just want answers, and it's great. I mean, I think you should continue doing it. I certainly, I feel old enough and bold enough living here in France in a farm that I can say what I want. I really don't care. But I mean, I wouldn't, if somebody, occasionally people send me stuff that I go, oh, I wish you hadn't sent me that. But, and I say to people, please don't send me anything which is definitely classified, because I don't want to have it on my computer.
No.
But people do share stuff which is like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. But if it's too sensitive, if it really affects national security, I wouldn't talk about it.
Oh no, of course
I draw a line on that.
Yeah, me too.
But I think I'm up for exposing what happened at Rendlesham Forest over 40 years ago. Nick Pope said, I asked him directly, I mean, Nick knows what happened. I mean, Nick Pope said, if you understand Rendlesham, you understand the true nature of UAP. I mean, that's his classic quote. Margaret Thatcher said, it wasn't aliens and you can't tell the people. Both of those phrases are absolutely true. But you need to understand why they're true, and then you start getting to the bottom of what actually was going on in Suffolk, and it's much more interesting than hieroglyphs telling you where the pyramids of Giza are, on a triangular craft. That story is fantastically interesting of why that. Why that story is even out there. I mean, it's really, really what happened to the poor experiences, the poor U.S. Air Force witnesses.
Well, this is it. I mean, were they interrogated and given sodium pentothal? Is that possibility?
Some of them were, not all of them, but some of them were. Some of them were really scared. Some of them were never have spoken about it. Other people took early retirement. There's been, I spoke to somebody who will remain nameless, who was one of the witnesses. I'm not saying which one. Somebody who doesn't talk, and he was a man, is definitely got PTSD and still about what happened, but not about. An encounter with an alien blobby, but what happened to him afterwards by his interrogation by OSI in a underground building in Bentwaters. He's absolutely furious at them, and is damaged today. And John Burroughs, I mean, his story is. It basically is proof of disclosure. If you're American, I don't care, because Britain's already disclosed everything. We know that UAP are real. But as the United States doesn't admit that yet, John Burroughs is proof, because they knew that he was injured by something man-made. They knew he was injured. They studied his injuries. They denied his claim for 15 years. And when John pulled out the rabbit out of his hat of producing the Condign report, which talks about U.S. Air Force people being injured by something in Rendlesham Forest, well, they call it the twin bases of Woodbridge and Bentwaters, in the Condign report. He produced that to the VA, the Veterans Association, and the DOT settled his claim and gave him the healthcare that he needed. So they admitted that they always knew what it was. They just didn't want to, go there. And, for me, if you are looking for evidence that the United States knew what was going on, knew that they were working on advanced stuff, and were trying to cover up. John Burroughs' case is the classic case. They knew, they covered it up, and eventually they admitted it. And in the court, I mean, the classic thing that John told me is when his case was settled, the DOD, he was told by his lawyer that the DOD had told her that John Burroughs' case is settled, but wait for what I'm about to say here. It's shocking. they told John Burroughs's advisor, a woman called Cheryl, who worked with his senator, John Burroughs will never be told what actually injured him. Okay, that's what they said to her, and she told John. So it's an amazing cover up of what actually happened. And it wasn't little green men. They knew what affected him. They knew what they were doing, and they knew that it was dangerous. But was there something more to it? Well, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It's good. It's good. It's one of the best cases ever because we have witnesses and injuries.
It's kind of in the English UFO mythology folklore now, isn't it? Really.
Well, it should be worldwide because it exposes the issue of military weaponization of UAP. The effects, the things that they were messing with are related to the phenomenon. They were looking at those kind of physics. They were looking at advanced physics that could be weaponized. As James Warrow would say. That's his line: weaponization of physics of UAP. That's exactly what they were doing. But is it related to genuine UAP? Yeah, maybe. They were looking at the phenomenon, which definitely exists. Yeah. Don't think, viewers, that I don't think it exists. I'm a really big person that says UAP are real. People see things all over the world, not just in Rendlesham, not just in Area 51. They see them in every country of the world because they exist and they're real. What are they? It's really hard because they're really hard to study. But UAP exist.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And what about you say there is proof,
right?
Scene proof. Is that going to be released to the public ever, or?
Well, that's the story, Mark. Both SETI and Breakthrough Listen and are for some reason not. They've gone really quiet about it. The story that I was told that BLC1, which stands for Breakthrough Listen Candidate 1, Candidate 1 being a SETI candidate that was a known radio source, was covered up by Breakthrough Listen, in my opinion. The chances are that their explanation that it was man-made technology. Can I tell you what they're saying and why it's?
Please do.
Here's the explanation. Oh, good. I can use my green blobby thing. If you could. Oh no, here it is. Yeah. So I'm just charging my bicycle lights. So here's Alpha Centauri and here's Parkes radio telescope in Australia. And Parkes, I'm really backwards because it's a camera. Parkes is looking at a source, and when they point away from it, it goes, and when they point to it, it's there, and when they point the other way, it goes. So it's a single point source, right? And it's a narrowband frequency not used by man. It's electromagnetic. And there's another piece of evidence, which is the clincher I'll go on to. What Breakthrough Listener are saying is that it's a satellite that is in lockstep with Alpha Centauri that matches its transit through the sky. That's pretty good. It's obviously geostationary but moving. How does that work? And it's using frequencies that are man-made, but not the frequencies that people use in satellites. Really? Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. And then they published the report, and then Parkes came back after the report. I believe this is slightly ambiguous, and said not only is it a man-made satellite using frequencies that humans don't use, that's in lockstep with our telescope, like crazy, but it's also Doppler shifting, means it's orbiting. Well, no, this Occam's razor. Is it a man-made satellite? Is there one? No. Is it transmitting in those frequencies? Do satellites transmit in those frequencies? No. Is it rotating just the same speed as the exoplanet in that star system? No. So is it more likely to be that planet? Yes. I mean, so why are they covering it up? And why are they only, and I've only got that evidence from BLC Candidate 1, BL Candidate 1. There's at least 15 other really good technological sources. The head of Breakthrough Listen isn't only just looking for technology, he's also looking for biosignatures, he's looking for all kinds of signatures. And I think the other enormous evidence is that we have tools in 2024, 2025 to actually find that we're not alone in the universe. I mean, a Cambridge group have done a spectral analysis of a different, not the same, a different exoplanet, and they found signs of what is obviously biological life in the atmosphere. And is that published and saying, I think we have confirmation we're not alone in the universe? No. Is other technological signatures supposedly that have probably been found are lights, or shiny stuff that causes, because we have the tools. James Webb is amazing, but also the radio telescopes are now no longer one telescope. They're all networked. A company in Holland called Astron networks every telescope in the world that is part of their group, and they do AI analysis of broadband multi-frequency, looking for and it's paid for by Breakthrough Listen partially, and the European Union through the Horizon Project. I mean, we have the evidence. Why aren't they telling us?
Well, yeah, why? Have you got any theories why?
Yeah, well, so the original story broke from a senior person in EU radio astronomy who wants to remain nameless. And he told me about Astron, and he told me about the BLC-1 signal, how it's found. And then when the shit hit the fan and everybody, Sabine Horsfelder and John Goodyear all called me a effing idiot, and it doesn't exist, and you should read the Breakthrough Listen fake paper. Sorry, Breakthrough Listen. Or this I went back to my man and said, what's going on? I'm looking like a complete twat. Yeah. And he said, no, you're not. What's going on is that there is a governments have been informed. The UK government, the Department of Trade and Industry, wrote a report, The Exploitation of Extraterrestrials. They wrote that for the Keir Starmer government. The Vatican published a protocol for bishops, but the public haven't been informed because, and this is really interesting, I didn't know this, but SETI, and I'm surprised that Breakthrough Listen are going along with this, but it kind of makes sense. This guy told me the problem is if you come out as SETI and say, we think we've got very good evidence that we found a biological or technological signature of an alien race, the News of the World, the Daily Mail, Fox News and News Nation will immediately say, what did they look like? Well, we didn't, what are they saying? Well, those two are enormous leaps from detecting possibly, maybe, that there's evidence way out there that we can just barely detect, to what color are their socks? I mean, so he said they don't want to publish it until they're at least 2 steps ahead of the obvious effing questions. And that's what they're doing right now. They're gathering as much evidence as they can, and are waiting. Maybe there's some unseen hand of advice saying, not great timing.
Who would that ultimate hand be? Who would that be?
I have no idea, because who would have that? Because SETI seem quite independent. Breakthrough Listen are, basically Yuri Milner self-funded research group. Breakthrough does lots of other things, and the other people who probably have the evidence are China and Russia, who are very big on radio telescopes. And I can't. It would be really sad if SETI and Breakthrough Listen get pipped to the post by China, which they might. The China big dish can do the radio telescope stuff that SETI can do. That it's big. It's bigger than. I mean, it was bigger than Arecibo type dish, and it's as good as Green Bank.
Hmm.
It's probably not as good as there's a brilliant new telescope being built in Australia called the Square Kilometre Array, which is the real source of data.
Wow.
That is linked to Holland, to Astron. I mean, they are taking so much data from that, and a new one in South Africa that nobody knows about. It's great, fantastic work.
So basically, we could be, if they get their act together, and get
If
to
they
step-
want to, yeah.
if they want to, they could release the truth about it fairly soon.
I don't think it's going to be such a shock to humans.
Right.
I think people will go out tomorrow and buy a loaf of bread and a pint of milk. I mean, I think it's good. I think it might change the way that we think about ourselves. But I would release the data as soon as possible. I'd be quite happy if they say, look, we've got really quite good, but it's obviously open for interpretation, evidence that there's life of some kind, but not as we know it, Jim, on this exoplanet. It's not technological. It's just evidence of a living organism or a plant, a bug, whatever. I think that would be great.
Of course it would, yeah. That'd be the first step. Absolutely.
It's more likely. I mean, if you look at planet Earth, every single creature on planet Earth, including creatures much older than humans like cephalopods, squid and octopus, they don't drive Teslas, do they? I mean, that's the point. It's only humans who are technological. We're the meddling humans. My goats are very happy to have somewhere to sleep, something to eat, and are safe. That's what they want. They don't want to produce the I Love Lucy show.
I mean, that's a different question altogether, and why are humans so different from every other life form? But
Right. And so the chances are aliens will be very happy on their planet. They won't know anything about us. We might detect them, but there's no way that they're flying here in spaceships. It's very unlikely. There might be a few, but they're going to be really rare. I think most civilizations out there are going to be weird life forms. Very weird, I hope.